There are love stories that the world holds onto, not just because they are beautiful, but because they seem to prove something. They become evidence that fame doesn't have to destroy you, that two people at the top of their respective worlds can still choose each other, still find something real beneath the glitter and noise. For nearly 2 decades, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman were that story. Country music's golden boy and Hollywood's most enduring leading lady, a couple who walked red carpets hand in hand and made the world believe they had cracked the code on lasting love in the most unforgiving industry on earth. Then, in the autumn of 2025, the fairy tale ended. And in its wake, Keith Urban said things that no one expected, truths that reframed not just the divorce, but the entire marriage. To understand what Keith ultimately confessed, you have to go back to the beginning, not the fairy tale version, but the raw, complicated truth that was always quietly present beneath the surface. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban first met in 2005 at the Day USA Gala in Los Angeles, an event celebrating their shared home country of Australia. There was an immediate connection, a sense of recognition between two people who had both been shaped by extraordinary ambition and an equally extraordinary price. They went public with their relationship, became engaged, and married in Sydney in June 2006. From the outside, it was everything a love story was supposed to be: the ceremony, the dress, the music, the vows. What the guests in that chapel didn't fully know was that the man standing at the altar was already carrying something that would test every word he was about to speak. LOL. Prior to their wedding, Keith Urban was grappling with drug addiction and alcoholism. He had not entered a recovery program. He had no sponsor, no structured support, no real plan for sobriety. He would later admit openly that meeting Nicole had become, in his own mind, a substitute for the work of recovery, that loving her had allowed him to believe he was holding it together when in reality he was simply holding it at bay. The fragile arrangement didn't last long. Barely 4 months into their marriage, the addictions he had done nothing about blew their marriage to smithereens, leaving him in rehab for 3 months with no idea what was going to happen to them. For a couple barely out of their wedding photographs, it was a devastating rupture, one that would echo through the rest of their years together in ways neither of them fully appreciated at the time. LABIBLEHELLO. What Nicole did next would define the next 19 years of both their lives. Rather than walk away, which no one would have blamed her for, she staged an intervention and chose to stay, pushing through every negative voice, including, Keith would later admit, perhaps some of her own. That decision was not just an act of love, it was an act of extraordinary faith in someone who had not yet given her reason to have it. Keith recalled to Oprah Winfrey in 2010 that the intervention was done with such profound love that he immediately agreed to get help. He entered rehab, emerged sober in early 2007, and began the long process of rebuilding his sobriety, his career, and his marriage. AOL Celebs in Depth. The years that followed were, by all visible measures, a success. Keith stayed sober. His career soared. Albums stacked up, tours sold out, and awards accumulated across 2 decades of some of the most beloved music in contemporary country. Nicole, meanwhile, moved from film to film with the relentlessness of someone who simply cannot stop creating: Moulin Rouge, Cold Mountain, Big Little Lies, Bombshell, Baby Girl, a filmography that kept expanding, a reputation that kept growing. They had 2 daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, and they showed up for each other at ceremonies and galas and milestones with what appeared to be genuine warmth and affection. Keith once told Rolling Stone he was born into Nicole, describing her as the miracle that helped him kick addiction. In 2016, he called marrying her life-beginning, not just life-changing. These were not the words of a man performing for a camera. They sounded like someone who meant every syllable. Country tang daily. Yet even in the years of stability, the structural pressures of their life together were quietly accumulating. 2 careers at the highest level of 2 entirely separate industries meant that their lives were, by necessity, lived in parallel more often than together. The 2 walked the red carpet together at the Academy of Country Music Awards as recently as May 2025 and were spotted in Nashville in June watching soccer during the FIFA Club World Cup, moments that, in hindsight, were among the last photographs of a marriage that was already quietly disintegrating. Sources close to the couple noted that by that summer, Keith had acquired his own residence in Nashville and had moved out of their family home, a detail that would only emerge publicly weeks later when the news of their separation broke. ALAL. On September 29, 2025, TMZ reported that Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban had been living apart since the beginning of summer, with the actress holding the family together through the difficult period while Keith had been gone. A day later, Nicole filed for divorce. The filing cited irreconcilable differences, and according to legal documents, the couple had already worked out the terms of their separation before Nicole formally filed, a detail that accelerated the process considerably, with the divorce finalized on January 6, 2026. It was swift, quiet, and clearly non-impulsive. Whatever had happened between them had been processed, grieved, and resolved long before the world was invited to watch. ALAL. The confession that reshapes the entire narrative came not in 2025, but the year before, and it was not a confession made under the pressure of a failing marriage. It was made in a moment of apparent love, at a ceremony designed to celebrate Nicole. At the AFI Life Achievement Award Gala in 2024, Keith stood on stage and spoke directly about those first catastrophic months of their marriage, that his addictions had blown their union to smithereens, that he had spent 3 months in rehab wondering if his marriage was over before it had really begun, and that Nicole had pushed through every negative voice and chosen love. He confessed that he had no idea what was going to happen to them, and declared that if anyone wanted to see what love in action truly looked like, they need only consider what Nicole had done. He ended the tribute by saying that her capacity to love was like no one he had ever met. The camera found Nicole in the audience, visibly moved, wiping away a tear. Hello, AOL. At the time, it was received as one of the most romantic moments in recent awards ceremony history. A man acknowledging, publicly and without vanity, that his wife had saved him. A love letter delivered in front of peers and cameras and the full weight of public attention. But when the divorce was announced barely a year later, those same words were heard differently. Urban's confession about his addiction blowing his marriage to smithereens had once been a heartwarming tribute. In the wake of the split, insiders suggested those raw admissions had highlighted strains that never fully disappeared. Friends who were asked about the separation told reporters they were not surprised. The scars from those early years, they said, had run too deep. Yahoo! There is something quietly devastating in that recalibration. A speech that was meant to be a declaration of survival became, in retrospect, an inadvertent inventory of damage. Keith had not lied in that speech, every word appeared to be true. But the truth he was telling was more complicated than the romantic framing of the moment suggested. He had nearly destroyed his marriage in its infancy. Nicole had stayed not because everything was fine, but because she believed in something that wasn't yet proven. And the years of sobriety and success that followed were real, but they did not erase what had been broken, only built around it. The country star reportedly came to realize that both he and Nicole had allowed their careers to take priority over their relationship, a recognition that arrived too late to change the outcome. International Business Times. The financial dimension of the divorce added another layer of complexity to an already layered story. Tucked into the prenuptial agreement the couple signed before their 2006 wedding was an extraordinary clause, widely described as a cocaine clause, designed to incentivize Keith's sobriety through a financial structure unusual even by Hollywood standards. Per reports, Keith was to abstain from alcohol and other drugs, including cocaine, and would earn $600,000 per year for remaining sober. Considering he has reportedly maintained his sobriety since 2006, he could be in line to receive more than $11 million as a result of that clause. Some reports place the figure higher. The clause had been written as an act of hopeful encouragement, a way of structuring accountability into the contract of their marriage. In the context of the divorce, it became something far more complicated, a reminder that even the most intimate decisions carry legal weight, and that love and contractual obligation are rarely as separate as we want them to be. Celebs in-depth with family law. After the split became public, Keith was filmed for an upcoming reality show called The Road, in which he admitted feeling lonely and miserable while touring, footage that had been recorded before the announcement but now took on a starkly different meaning. Here was a man at the height of his professional life, doing exactly what he had always done, standing on stages in front of thousands of people who adored him, and confessing to loneliness. The touring schedule that had defined his career for 30 years had also, apparently, been quietly consuming the marriage. The road giveth and the road taketh away. International Business Times. Nicole, for her part, handled the public dimension of the divorce with the same composure she has brought to every difficult chapter of her life. Breaking her silence in a March 2026 interview with Variety while promoting her Prime Video series Scarpetta, she said simply that she was always going to be moving toward what is good, that she was grateful for her family and focused on keeping them intact. "Everything else I don't discuss out of respect," she said. "I'm staying in a place of we're a family, and that's what we'll continue to be." She spoke of her daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, whom she called suddenly women, with the particular tenderness of a mother who has been the steady presence throughout the storm. AOL. She acknowledged that 2025 had been a year of withdrawal for her. "Last year, I was quiet. I had other things going on. I was in my shell," she told the interviewer. For someone who has spent the better part of 4 decades in public life, who survived the implosion of her marriage to Tom Cruise, rebuilt her career and her sense of self, and went on to become one of the most decorated actresses of her generation, this was a woman who knew how to survive. She had done it before. She would do it again. Gulf News. What Keith Urban ultimately confessed, across several years and several public forums, was not a single dramatic revelation but a mosaic of admissions that, assembled together, told the full story. He had come into his marriage carrying damage he hadn't dealt with. Nicole had chosen to love him through it. He had credited her publicly for saving his life. And then, somehow, across 19 years of children and tours and films and red carpets and anniversary posts, the weight of what they carried had become more than the structure between them could hold. The marriage ended not with a scandal or a single catastrophic event, but with the slow, quiet conclusion that some things, once broken at the foundation, cannot be entirely rebuilt, only honored for what they were, and released. In the end, what Keith confessed was simply the truth, that love, even extraordinary love, is not always enough on its own. That two people can genuinely admire and care for each other and still find themselves living separate lives in the same story. That the woman who saved him deserved more than he was able to give. And that the most honest thing he could offer, long after the wedding and the songs and the speeches, was the simple acknowledgement that he had known it all along.